Welcome to the Sisterhood of Sweat. I'm here today with Dr. Sylvia Tara. Sylvia Tara was driven to research fat, science, and lifestyle after she finally got fed up with eating less and exercising more than her slimmer friends throughout her life. Her experiences told her there was more to weight loss than just calorie in, calorie out. As a biochemist, she was driven to get to the bottom of fat's mysteries and the reason it vexes us. In her best-selling book, The Secret Life of Fat, she reveals the complex biology of fat and how it resists loss, and what to do to remove stubborn fat. Readers will learn that fat surprisingly uses many tricks to stay on us, and only if you understand those tricks can you beat fat at its game. Dr. Tara holds a PhD in biochemistry from the University of California at San Diego and an MBA from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. She was a consultant with McKinsey and Company and has worked at the world's largest biotechnology companies. Dr. Tara has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, New Yorker, The Times UK, the Daily Mail, Women's Health, Wired, Scientific American, and The Lancet. She has been interviewed on NPR, Sirius Radio, WNYC, BBC Radio, and appeared on NBC, ABC, Fox, and C-SPAN. She has also presented her work at the Smithsonian and the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, my school, and recently was featured in a Nova documentary, The Truth About Fat. Today, we talked about the secret life of fat, what the most surprising thing Dr. Tara found out about fat, and why it's so hard to lose fat, why some people have more difficulty losing weight than others, what the role of bacteria and viruses play in obesity, why women gain weight easier than men, how weight gain changes as you age and what you can do about it, and that you could be fit but fat, such as being like a sumo wrestler, and what the future of obesity treatment is, and what people can do now to manage weight, and all kinds of tricks and secrets. And I felt like it was a fresh take on the topic of weight loss, or why our body is holding fat, and knowing more about our hormones, leptin and ghrelin, how that all comes into play, like your appetite and just the way the body works in general, why it wants to hold on to fat at times, and why and how we could work with our body instead of against it to help it release fat. Such a great episode today with Dr. Sylvia. Without further ado, let's dive in. I am more than excited today to welcome Sylvia Tara to the Sisterhood of Sweat. Welcome.
Hey, hi, thanks. Good to be here.
I almost changed our name to the secret Sisterhood of Swell today. Sometimes you trip over your words. It's like, I've said that how many times, and today it's a tongue twister. So Sylvia, you have written this book that I think a lot of us might relate to the title, The Secret Life of Fat. Why did you decide to write this book, and how did you come up with that title?
Yeah, that's the great questions, both of them. So I have a body that really gains weight really quickly, right? Very quickly. So I'll gain weight faster than most people. In order to lose weight, I have to take really extreme measures. And it's always been like this. Since I was a kid, I've been like this. And I went on a number of diets, and I got really frustrated because I would see people around me who were thin and they could eat whatever they wanted to. And there's a couple examples I give in the book where I have a friend who's just chowing down, on a big burrito and a beer or whatever they feel, and they're not worried, and they're 90 pounds and they're really thin and they just run around like this. And This happened to me enough times that I thought something's different about me and my body. I have to work at this by far harder. I have to be more restrictive, much more diligent than other people do. And I don't understand why. And before I go on even one more diet, I'm going to figure this out. So I'm a biochemist by training. I have a PhD in biochemistry. So I thought, okay, I'm going to use all the tools at my disposal to figure out fat. And so I read for 5 years everything I could about fat in the scientific literature. I talked to a whole bunch of scientists about their research on fat. And what I found out was so surprising and shocking that I thought, I have to write a book. And so it really galvanized me to spend the time to write the book. And I mean, the reason it's called The Secret Life of Fat is because fat's actually really different than what we think it is. I think the common perception is that it's blubber. It's reserved calories. We should get rid of it at all costs, right? The less you have, the better off you are. And it's not true, right? In fact, it's pretty far from the truth. Fat is actually a really complex endocrine organ. So not only is it holding calories for us, it's also manufacturing and secreting hormones into our body that the rest of the organs in our body depend on. So when you lose a lot of fat, it actually causes all kinds of issues for your body because you don't have enough of these hormones. So it's like losing your thyroid gland or your adrenal gland, right? Other organs in the endocrine system that also secrete glands, right? So fat is one of those. And so you have to think of fat like skin. If you just take a square piece of skin, it's just a piece of skin tissue. But skin in its totality functions like an organ, right? And it was thought to be the largest organ we had. But fat is the same way. So just a piece of fat is just a piece of fat tissue, no big deal. But fat as a whole throughout your body is actually very complex and functions like an organ. So that's the secret of fat. And because it is an organ, your body tries to protect it. It doesn't want to lose it. And when you try to lose it, there's all these secret things
It
that go
holds
on in
on
your
to it.
body to hold on to it, to maintain it, and to get it back if you lose it, right? So it's fascinating. It's very scientific. And it's not like a textbook, The Secret Life of Fat. I wrote it through stories of patients, stories of dieters, stories of scientists, what they went through to get to the research, and stories of doctors who treat patients. And so it's a very easy read, even though it's pretty scientific.
I kind of find fat to be like a protection mechanism sometimes. Like when I got all of these injuries in menopause from like doing my flipping across the stage that I'd always been doing, but all of a sudden it just during menopause, my body wasn't having it. I got injuries and then not, because I had been in menopause for a few years before. All of a sudden I had fat, which I had never had. And it wasn't because of a change in diet. It wasn't because I don't work out a lot. I really feel like it was like a protection mechanism, like my body was trying to protect itself. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, our bodies are a lot more clever than you might ever imagine. So you can actually produce fat without eating at all, right? We have stem cells in our body. Stem cells are these kind of root cells that can grow into a muscle cell, a cartilage cell, or a fat cell, depending on what the body's needs are. And so in people who are severely fat deficient, like those with anorexia nervosa, their stem cells will turn into fat cells automatically because the body's sensing there's not enough fat and we need fat to be functional. It'll just produce fat cells, and that's not with eating. So the fact that your stem cell can produce fat shows you what an important tissue it is and an organ it is, right? Because the stem cells are reserved for those cells that are critical to your survival to let your body be able to produce them as needed. So it kind of shows you how important it is. And we see areas like that where your body is just trying to create fat to save you. For people with anorexia nervosa, say, sometimes their bone marrow gets full of fat, and it's because those stem cells are trying to produce fat and save them in a way. Also, women going through menopause, our fat also produces estrogen, right? So our ovaries do, but then as you go through menopause, your fat becomes a primary source of estrogen. And there's the theory out there that it's one reason why it's hard for middle-aged women to lose fat because their bodies are now dependent on fat for estrogen, and your body has ways of protecting that fat. So fat can be protective. In fact, there's something called the obesity paradox, where for some illnesses, even those ones thought to be caused by fat, they find that a little bit overweight is actually protective. Those people have lower mortality. So things like diabetes and heart disease, which are usually associated with fat, and you should be losing as much fat as you can to protect yourself from that. Turns out if you actually have those diseases, in a more advanced stage, people who are about 10 to 15 pounds overweight tend to do better than those who are underweight. So fat has other functions. We're just learning about fat. It wasn't really studied much until around the 1980s or so. As people got fatter, obesity started to become a concern. The NIH and other funding agencies started giving more money for fat research, diabetes research, to understand what was going on here, what the risk was to the public. So fat as a science is very new. If you think about it, it's only like, what is that, 50 years old or so, less, right? Probably something like 40 years old. And so we don't know as much about it as we do, say, cancer or other diseases that people have. So we're just starting to learn, and these are some of the early learnings of fat, but they're fascinating. And I'll be very curious to know what else comes out of the science for fat.
Yeah, I do find it very fascinating. And I think what it was is I was lacking the estrogen and, the estradiol and all the hormones where, of course, when you're postmenopausal and they're all going away, but I was still working out super hard without I think too much because I was doing too many shows. And so what I found is backing down, doing less was actually more because
Yeah.
my body was seeing it as an attack on my body. So when I took a break or took a week off, I would lose 5 pounds or lose some fat around the middle, or I would notice, oh, my body seems to like me doing less now rather than more. Uh, and so that was one of the things I thought was most surprising about, the transition from, you know, premenopause to postmenopause. What is one of the most surprising things that you have found out about fat?
Fat can control your brain. So, so our fat produces a hormone called leptin, and leptin is secreted by fat into your bloodstream, and it goes into your circulation, and it binds with the hypothalamus area of your brain. And when it binds there, it tells your brain that everything's okay in the world. We have adequate levels of fat. There's enough nutrition around, right? You're overall satiated. You get hungry before meal times, things like that, but overall, you're not ravenously constantly looking for food. You feel okay. When you start to lose fat, your leptin levels go down because fat produces leptin. When you start to have less fat, you have less leptin. Your brain senses a change in leptin level. And when that happens, it goes into overdrive looking for food. You get more hungry, right? And it doesn't even matter how you lose fat. If you get liposuction, the same effect will happen. People seek food more after liposuction. Or if you lose your fat through exercise, you're not even dieting, you're just exercising, same thing will happen. Less leptin means you're more food seeking. And so it's a big myth because I think in the dieting industry, it's always, well, if you have the right diet, you won't feel hungry. Join our diet. You'll never feel hungry. You'll always, you'll lose weight, but that doesn't really happen. As you start losing fat, you do want food more. And so it's a big aha moment because otherwise, it's kind of like me. I was always thinking I must have the wrong diet because I don't feel not hungry. I don't feel totally satiated, but it's not. It just is something you have to get through. The other part is that leptin also controls your metabolism. So our muscle cells bind with leptin. So again, when you have a decrease in leptin, your muscle switches to a different muscle cell, which is much more efficient at burning energy. And so you actually burn about 22% fewer calories than somebody who's not lost weight because your muscles are switching to be more efficient. Your thyroid hormone is also affected by decreases in leptin. So overall, you have a lower metabolism. So it's not because you're lazy that you're not losing weight or you're unmotivated that you're not losing weight. It's the way fat is controlling us to try to come back on our body that makes us seek food, makes us hungrier, makes us more obsessive about food, and also lowers our metabolism so that it will much more easily come back.
And it just is that, that really resonated with me, what you said about the leptin, because I will always tell my clients, and it kind of goes along with this, if you work out more or you run too much, you do too much cardio, then you're hungrier. And so it kind of defeats its purpose. And I think it really makes that happen, what you were talking about with the leptin. How can we work with our body? I mean, how can we lose this fat? Why is it so hard to lose?
There's a lot of reasons. So in the book, I talk about all the ways we get fat that are not all food related, honestly. So there's all kinds of components to it. So there's a genetic component, right? There's some people who gain weight easier than others. I write about full populations that have a certain genotype that on certain foods, like they gain weight easier. Pima Indians are one of these, right? They were kind of American Indians that settled in Arizona. And as Caucasians moved into the area, right, in the early 1900s, they brought Caucasian foods with them, more flour, more sugar, more bacon. And the Pima Indians were used to farming and hunting, right, eating very raw, natural foods. The Pima Indians started getting obese, right, to the point that it got attention of scientists of what was going on here. And what's interesting is that they started eating Western foods and they were getting obese on these Western foods, but the Caucasians around them did not get obese on these foods. And so the question was why? Why was this happening? It's because they came from a lineage where they experienced a lot of famine, right? They were nomadic, they lived in deserts, a couple times a century, a big famine would occur. So the ones who survived with these ones that had a very, what they called a thrifty genotype, they were able to extract everything out of food and store it away very efficiently. And they lived to the generations. And so they descended from this line. Of course, the Caucasians weren't in the same buckets, right? They did not extract that much of the food and save it. And so it just shows you that gene pools, right? The types of genes that you have, right? You're kind of what you're descended from matter a lot. And there's specific genes I talk about too, new discoveries of specific genes that are correlated with appetite or correlated with weight gain. So it can be an issue. Other ways we gain age. We have fat burning hormones normally, testosterone, estrogen, right? Growth hormone. And as you age, those decline. So does thyroid hormone. And so then what fat starts piling on. We're not burning it the way we used to. We have more a decline in muscle mass and bone mass as well, things that normally burn fat. So that's a factor. Even the bacteria in our gut is a factor, right? So we have
Yeah, that's a big factor.
yeah, and depending what distribution you have, you could be getting more calories out of your food, right? Extracting more or extracting less. And so if you have really stubborn fat, it's very frustrating. And if you're like me, you find yourself going to this diet, that diet, like, who do I listen to? Right. I got to where you have to understand the science of fats in your body and what your body does with the food that you put into it. And once you understand this, you can kind of get an idea of where are you on the fat spectrum, right? Like, do you have easy fat, stubborn fat? What's your family type like? What age are you? Did you have kids or not? All this matters. And then if you have stubborn fat, you don't have to be sad. You will have to work harder though, right? It's not that you have to be heavy. You just have to know you're going to have a heavier battle. It's like if you have a spouse or someone who lives with you that can eat, pretty readily, they don't have to do much to lose weight. They go on a diet, they lose like 7 pounds in a week, and you're struggling to lose half a pound. You don't let that throw you off, right? Everyone's very individual in their fat loss journey. You might have very stubborn fat, a body that loves to hold on to it. If you've dieted before, like we talked about with leptin, you have a caloric penalty, right? You need fewer calories, slower metabolism, more driven to eat. It's just going to take you longer. So the key for people with stubborn fat, and I have a whole bunch of tips actually in the course in the book, stay at it for longer. Don't get discouraged, even though it can be discouraging. You have to be much more strict. There's less cheating you can do. And then there's certain things you can throw in that really spike the effort. One is intermittent fasting is a great thing for stubborn fat if it's
I was
really
going to ask that next. Yeah.
yeah. And then high intensity interval training is another good one for really stubborn fat that'll actually get it to move. But then first, and foremost is that you just have to be patient. It's going to take you probably about I won't even put a number on it, just a lot longer than it will for like a 22-year-old male versus a 55-year-old female, right? That 55-year-old female just has to be a lot more patient.
And I think a lot more diligent with what you're putting in your mouth. Like, you can't get away with the same things maybe you did when you were 18, the same things you would eat that would just melt off. You have to be more diligent about really just eating real food and not like eating all these box products and these sugar laden things and where we're eating trans fats and all of this stuff. You were saying earlier about your hormones. I want to tackle, what do you think about then if somebody's losing all of their hormones? What about doing bioidentical hormones? Does that help for that, or what do you think?
I think so. I have a chapter on that in the book, right? So with age, we lose these hormones. And there are some people that get themselves into a real knot, right? They've kind of lost their hormones and they start being a little bit lazier, less energetic, and they gain even more weight, which causes more problems. And there are people who I think it's a benefit. And you don't even have to take them forever necessarily. You can take them to get back on your feet, so to speak, right? Kind of jumpstart the body a little bit, take advantage of it. I write about a male patient who was taking supplementary hormones, and he had just gotten sluggish. He had gotten, heavy. He was going through a divorce. He was kind of depressed, and he started getting shots. Right, he got testosterone supplements, right, and some other things as well. He said, "Sonny, he just had so much energy. Like he was really ready to go at it again, kind of like when you're 20, right, and you have those surging hormones."
The birds are singing, and you're like, I feel good.
And he used it to his advantage. He started working out a lot. He started getting more disciplined, about working out. And it kind of builds on itself. Like once you have the energy, you see the weight going, you're feeling a little bit better, then you keep going with it. And so I don't think he takes them now. He did for a period of time that helped him. So everyone's different. I don't poo-poo anything, depending on what state you're in, right? And what your risk benefit profile is. I think it's something worth looking at, because doing nothing also has risk. If you are really heavy, right, doing nothing has its own health risk to it. So it's worth seeing a doctor about if you're in that age group, I think, which is kind of middle age, hormones dying, dying off, and you need to jumpstart.
What do you like as yourself personally? How young are you?
Oh, you can't ask me that. I'm in my 50s now. Yeah.
Yeah. So you look really young. So my question would be then, what was your biggest struggle? And then what did you do about it? What was your success?
Yeah. So, gosh, so weight's always been a thing. Since I was 12, I started gaining weight really easily. And that's when I noticed my friends could eat cake at the pool and I couldn't. And so I think what I just learned is to really watch everything. So in a way, after I learned all of this, of all these things that fat's doing within our body, and how tricky it is, how it works to keep itself on, right? And I also have a chapter about women versus men. Women interact with their fat completely different than men. We store it at 2 to 3 times the rate that men do. When we exercise, you brought up eating after exercise, we actually produce more ghrelin, which is another hormone that makes you hungry. And women produce 33% more than men after we exercise. So we're really hungry afterward. So I had all this knowledge, all this learning now. And I think I just, now that I was equipped, I felt stronger and more confident about taking on fat. So that was the change it had for me. It's like, okay, now I get how smart fat is. I get what it's trying to do. No wonder I'm having trouble. No wonder I gain fat back easily, because that yo-yo dieting, right, that lower metabolism I had is looking to come back to me now. So I just, in a way, it energized me to go at it hard. And so I kept a log of everything I was eating and the time I was eating it, right? And that's when I noticed that when I stop eating earlier in the day, say 3 or 4 o'clock, and I don't eat till the next day, I actually lose weight. It starts to move. So it takes a little bit higher energy and effort if you have stubborn fat to start getting it off you. And there's a number of reasons for that. Intermittent fasting actually increases the activity of growth hormone in your body, which is a great fat burner, right? You also get glucagon, you get higher levels of leptin, which produce more satiation. We have to think of ourselves now as like a bag of biochemicals. It's not calorie in, calorie out. If you eat a muffin, it will have a different effect than someone else eating that same muffin. And it's not something that most diet gurus will really be forthcoming with, or maybe even know about. But there's research showing that the blood sugar response is different in everybody. Some people can eat a cookie, have very little blood sugar response. Other people have a bite and it spikes. So we're all very different. So I kept a log, of everything I ate in the time, when I stopped eating, how much exercise I did, and started to notice trends. And, like I said, I noticed stopping eating earlier in the day actually helps a lot. High intensity interval training on a fasted state helped an awful lot. There were some foods that correlated with continued loss, other foods that would stop it in its tracks. And it's different for everyone, so the log becomes important. But the quick wins are, if you have really stubborn fat, is leafy greens, like salads. Really filling salads are good. Flour, things like that, are very bad. But the things that are real kickers are, like what's in it, because you can take advantage of your microbiome and what you put into your salad that'll help give you the right distribution of bacteria in your gut, the times that you eat as well, and then what you can get away with in certain amounts so that you stay on it. Because if you do have starving fat, the other thing is you have to stay on your diet forever. Like there's no real coming off it. So you have to find a diet you really like and want to stay on for a while. And there's some diets that are severe. They're effective, but they're severe. So like say that the no carb diets, they work. You can lose weight, but they're hard. And after a while, people get tired of it. They start eating. It doesn't work for their lifestyle. So find one that you like and can stay on for a long time and be patient with it. I get emails from people. I had one person email me saying, gosh, I'm in my mid 50s and I've now, I can't lose any weight whatsoever. And I can almost guess that, you can't snack at night. Like there's less cheating that you get away with the older you get. Your body's like looking for a signal. Are we gaining? Are we losing? Are we staying the same? So unless you're constantly doing it every day, if you can throw off the signal, right? Like you have an apple, like in your fasting window, you kind of throw off the whole trajectory. So like, oh, well, maybe we are gaining after all, right? And it starts to get on that gain path. So it's just more complicated. And I think the book is a nice read, but I think the course actually takes you through more of how to implement all the science then into your day-to-day and how to make it work for you.
Now, how much do you think, though, like as you were talking, different people lose weight differently, that our blood types fall into play? Because I personally feel that if you're AB and I'm O positive, or O negative, or the whatever blood type you are, that you are digesting probably your foods differently, and that probably does play a little bit of a role in what you should be eating. And
I haven't seen anything on that. I mean, have you found
the blood type diet? You haven't?
I haven't found anything on that. Did you find any like solid research on that showing to people of various blood types?
There is some solid research on that. And also, I would say another thing that I like to do with my clients, if we're doing fasting, then is if we can do intermittent fasting, or we can also do a little longer fast, like a water fast. It really does boost your metabolism. There's a lot of science on it. And to take, when you do the fast, when you break the fast, is to do like blood sugar testing and see when I eat this oatmeal or this apple or this whatever, what is my blood sugar doing after a fast? It tells you a lot about the foods you can eat and not eat, and where you fall on the spectrums, which I think having that knowledge, you're armed with some knowledge, which can go a long way to helping you get results.
It's fantastic. And I think there's certain wearable devices and different things you can do now too, to always be constantly testing your levels of hormones and glucose. You'd be surprised. Like I noticed when I was logging, I could eat certain things, and there were things that were supposed to be absolute no-go foods. You were never supposed to touch them. So something like a banana, I don't know, like they're supposed to be very high glycemic index and all this, and they're terrible. They have no effect on me at all. So we're all really quite individual with it. And I get like white flour. I can eat chocolate, and I don't actually gain weight on minimal amounts of chocolate. It's fine.
Right.
If I have a minimal piece of cookie, I will gain weight off that cookie. So it's the flour, I think, that has a big effect.
It's probably the white flour. Well, I always just say white bread is twice dead.
Yeah. So. Like cake, right?
Yeah. So it's probably like, I notice those things too, like what you said. Like if I have any gluten, if I have Ezekiel bread, I can have a little, but like I have to cut it off, because my body reacts to it, because there is gluten in the Ezekiel bread. I hate to bust anybody's bubble out there today that thought that there was no gluten in it. But also, my body does react to too much gluten, too much dairy. Like I notice these things, and I like elimination diets for the purpose, or just experimenting with clients so they can see, oh my gosh, like that really works. But when I added this in my body, then that's when I saw I was bloating. I was, all these things. And your body does tell you if you're listening to it.
Yeah, I think so. And what you've done to your body also has an effect, right? So if you've gone on an absolutely no carb kind of diet, and then you start eating carbs, you'll gain really quickly, right? Because your body's now not used to having that insulin. And once you provoke it, it's going to pack everything away, right? So
Hmm.
depending on what
Right.
diet you've been on for a while, that's going to also affect how you react to the food that you're eating.
Yes,
So
and I do believe that because I've done so many different types because of, competing and going to the integrated school of nutrition and doing all the different things. I've seen the hundreds of diets, the different ways they're done, and I think you learn with the carbs, if you eliminate them completely for too long, then you're which is an extreme, your body gets used to that. And then when you start putting the carbs back in, then it doesn't react in the same way. You might not tolerate it in the same way. So I personally think no extremes,
yeah,
because your body holds on to whatever you're not giving it.
yeah. You have to be really clever, especially as you age, right? I mean, we just don't have all the latitude we used to have where it just comes off. It gets a lot harder. And for women, there's this kind of trajectory where girl babies are actually born fatter than boy babies. Like we naturally have more fat. It's kind of how nature intended. We, like I said
for
before,
our
fat.
for our hormones because we're going to make babies.
That's right. Hormones for bone, right? There's a bone fat axis where they support each other. Brain volume is linked to fat as well. If you lose too much, you actually start losing your brain shrink. And it's frightening. And so for girls particularly, right? So we have, more fat as a baby. It's in puberty. If you don't have enough fat, your menstruation is delayed. So some young female athletes or ballerinas, they don't menstruate or they don't do it regularly. And so there's a certain level of fat you need to have for reproduction. You need fat for lactation. And then, interesting, as you go to middle age, you kind of need your fat for estrogen. And so our fat, like it's kind of high, or it's little or like less when we're really young, like, preteens. You start to need it more in your teens, and you need it even more, right, as you turn into your 20s and into your, reproductive years. And then middle age, we're the fattest ever during middle age. And then magically, fat starts to decline again as we get to late 60s, 70s. So there's a whole trajectory of fat for women and different roles fat plays in women's bodies at different times. And
I think,
so,
yeah,
fast,
like the body's completely smart.
yeah,
And so I think instead of getting frustrated with it, you can ask yourself a different question like, what is my body trying to tell me? Or what is it that I need to change because I'm doing something that makes my body think it needs to hold all this fat. What Hang on a second, my thing just popped. Okay. Why do you think that the weight gain changes with age?
I think it depends on what your body needs. So some of it is just, the physical. So as we age, we have less of our fat burning hormones. We don't have as much testosterone or growth hormone or estrogen. Those hormones are really good fat burners and they're really good tissue builders. They build muscle and they build bone. So as you have less of those hormones, you're gaining more fat, less muscle, less bone, right? Bone and muscle are also fat burning. And so you have less of that with age. Those hormones are fat burning. And so there are less of the hormones around. So now you're getting more fat. And it builds on itself. And so as you're getting, less of those hormones around and fat is accumulating or naturally, and you have less of the fat burning muscle, it's kind of weight gain begets weight gain. So you have to be a lot more careful about what you eat as you get into your 50s and beyond. You have to exercise more. You can replace some of the hormones with exercise, like really intense exercise. You'll produce more testosterone and growth hormone. We'll get some of that back. Our fat moves in our body as well. So our fat cells have receptors, kind of ears, right, for testosterone and growth hormone. And so as you have less of it, those receptors also change, and you get a different distribution of fat in your body. It's quite interesting. And so that's some of the reason. And for women, like there is that hypothesis that their fat is somewhat protective, for them. It's a source of estrogen as well. So your body kind of wants to hold on to it. So you don't have to live with it, but it does take a lot more effort to keep your fat in check with age, right? You have to run more aerobics, more weightlifting. And it's good for your health overall. You'll build more muscle, you'll build more bone. fat, burning kind of tissues, you'll burn more fat. And there's also a hormone that's released when you exercise. It's another hormone that fat releases called adiponectin. And adiponectin gets released from fat, goes into the blood. It actually guides your fat in your body to the safer deposits of fat. Right? So instead of going to your visceral area, we know visceral fat's not healthy. Adiponectin will guide fat that you eat, right, in your bloodstream to go into your butt and your legs and keep it away from your visceral area. So I write about sumo wrestlers who are really obese, but because they exercise for 6 hours a day and they have high levels of adiponectin, it's not visceral fat. It's actually subcutaneous fat, which is a healthier deposit of fat. And they
So
don't
they're
have
fit,
that.
but they're fat.
And they're totally fat. They're like the fattest you can be, and yet they're healthy. Right? I mean, 6 hours a day is not feasible for most people to exercise, but it's just the point.
But like, wouldn't you be frustrated if you were working out 6 hours a day and you were turning out like a sumo wrestler? I mean,
well, they get to eat a ton, so that's how they keep it on. But so like the exercise is also important for adiponectin. It'll keep your fat in the right places as well. And exercise is also correlated with lower levels of dementia, right? There's all kinds of benefits. It then turns beige fat brown. So we didn't talk about this much, but we have different types of fat in our body.
Yeah.
White fat's the kind we want to get rid of, right? There's brown fat. And there's something called beige fat. And when you exercise, beige fat actually turns brown, and then it starts to burn calories.
Yeah,
Brown
fat burns fat.
calories. So exercise is good all around for all those things I just said, right? And then keep up with really good leafy greens. Do a little bit of fasting. Stop eating late into the night, right? Or just get a fasting window going and get a good night's sleep. Sleep is important for growth hormone.
That's huge.
Yeah. So start to look at it more like biochemistry and less of calorie in, calorie out, because all of us, our bodies are doing something different with the food that we put in.
What about the keto diet? I know putting in good fat helps to take out bad fats out of our body. Well, how do you feel on the keto plan? What do you think of that?
I think it's good. I know people who are on it and they like it. I find for me, at least, it's more preparation, right? More careful shopping, careful prep than I probably like to do. And this is when I say that, you got thunder outside my window. It's really loud.
I can't hear them, so that's good news. It's like they decide they want to mow the grass or come ring the doorbell because you're on a podcast.
It's really loud. I'm glad if you can't hear it. Anyway, where was I? So when I talk about finding a diet that works for you and your lifestyle, right, I find that different diets work for different people. Like what I do of intermittent fasting, kind of skipping over dinner a bit, it doesn't work if you're traveling a lot or you're entertaining, or that like family meals are the big part of your your family and how you all socialize. So you got to find one that works for you. Likewise, diets that are kind of restrictive, that require special shopping or special eating. I did Atkins for a while, which was great. I lost weight, but I found I was very limited. So it didn't work well for me for the long run. And I find that with keto, sometimes people have trouble staying on it for the real long haul, and then they'll come off and they'll go and do something else. So, we talked about the effect of leptin and that kind of caloric penalty, that you now need 22% fewer calories. The issue there is that effect doesn't necessarily go away for everybody. It can last for a really long time, for years. So you have to find a diet and stay on it, because you have that caloric penalty now if you've yo-yo dieted. So find something that works. Take your personality into consideration. If you don't like a whole bunch of rules, don't go on a diet that has a whole bunch of rules of what you can buy or eat or not eat. I like intermittent fasting because there's more food latitude, that I call it. So I can eat a wider variety of foods when I do eat and not gain weight. And it's great for if you have like cravings or there's certain things you really like, you can have it in small amounts during your eating window, and you'll still lose weight. And there's research showing that people who eat the same amount of calories like before, what was it? I think it was 2:00 or so, compared to if they eat it all day, they'll actually lose weight if they restrict the eating window versus if they spread it all day. So there's really something to be said for intermittent fasting.
And I would say, I don't go full out keto, in the realm of, the 70% fat. But I've added more fat to my diet because it really does help with the hormones, and it also helps with the leptin. It helps with my appetite because my brain feels more like it's a brain food. Fat is, feeding your brain. So it's like, you need essential fat to just run your brain, which also it's what decides whether you're getting hormones or not. So like I find it just helps satiate my appetite when I'm getting more good fat, like maybe half an avocado, or I like to make my own salad dressing with Udo's oil, which I like it because it's not a bad flavor, and it's got the flaxseed oil, it's got the different oils. I like to have the good fat, but I am not going full out keto because I tried that. And I think 70% of eating fat and then, just the whole ratio, I just find myself better with just adding in the, postmenopausal age, a little more fat.
Yeah. It's satiating, right? So
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of like leafy green, raw vegetable type salads. I put plenty of fat in there because if you don't, you just find yourself seeking food an hour later, like constantly looking. And there's
Yes.
something very satiating about fat, right, on your salad. And it's interesting. I don't really gain weight off of it either. So like there's the whole perception of, low fat diets, right? That was all people did for the longest time. But I don't, as long as I'm not eating too much carb, I'm not gaining weight off that fat. So I agree with you completely. Having fat in your diet is good. And even some carb, like insulin, right? It actually has satiating effects. So we talked about leptin, but insulin as well, right? It also binds with your hypothalamus, and it also signals satiation to your body. And so you can be very strategic with how you provoke your insulin levels. And so sometimes, like after a salad or so, I'll have some carb, right? Purposely have some carb. Every now and then I'll purposely have something sweet because it provokes enough insulin. I don't think about food for 6 hours after that. And sometimes I'll actually eat less overall if I have a little bit of sugar than if I don't have that sugar because of the satiating effects of provoking insulin. Right. So just be smart. Like don't go off the deep end and have a whole pie or anything like that.
It balances your blood sugar if you're having good fat with like your good carb, like you're less likely to overeat and eat, a hot fudge, cake later. Because also like when you're having the good fat and you're having the good carb, the good fat lowers your insulin level. So you're able to eat the carbs. So I don't believe in a no carb diet. I don't believe in a low fat diet. I don't believe in a high protein. I believe in like more of a balanced diet that's sustainable.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree more. It's not fun to constantly withhold things. Like some people can do it, right? But like we all grew up eating a variety of foods. And if you go to a track where you can't eat anything ever, I find that people come off their diets more when they're on something very strict. So I think the balance is a really key part. And then if you restrict your eating window, you have wider food latitudes. So if you do want to eat something, you can, as long as you eat it before a certain time, say at noon or for breakfast. There's one diet that came out. I always wondered how this worked, but this woman, she focused on breakfast, eating whatever you wanted to for breakfast, basically. So if you wanted a cupcake, you could have it, but you have to have it at breakfast. And I don't know if there's any long-term research on that diet, but I found it interesting because she was taking advantage of the eating window.
Yeah, because it's kind of free at breakfast. It's kind of like you're going to burn that off.
Exactly. That's why if I cook something, I don't always eat it at night. Or if like my kids are into cooking now, like they'll make desserts and stuff. I'm like, okay, I will eat your dessert, but I won't eat it until breakfast. And then I just have it in the morning instead. It also makes you feel less deprived. I think it's not like you're withholding all this good stuff from yourself all the time. You can have it just tomorrow.
Love that. I try to make my eating fun, and I really personally think crowding out, like I just like to eat a lot of really good healthy food. To me, if you find a really good way to prepare your food
Yeah.
and you buy the fresh foods, it's really no hardship. And you walk away feeling amazing and good about yourself, and like not the sabotaging way of, oh my God, I ate that. Now I need to do umpteen hours on the treadmill. Oh gosh, I'm not going to fit in my jeans. I think, I liked the premise of asking myself, how do I want to feel at the end of the day? And also, like, if you can just learn fun ways to prepare your food, healthy food really does taste better, I
Oh,
think.
it's so much more satiating, isn't it? I mean, compared to when you get empty calories from some frozen chicken patty somewhere that you bought made. who knows what's in food anymore? So when I log really tight, I notice when I buy kind of ready-made food, I gain weight on it almost invariably, even if it's supposed to be healthy, right? So like a frozen chicken patty, it turns out it's not really just chicken. It's all kinds of stuff. It's filler, it's gelatin,
100 different ingredients.
add sugars and all kinds of stuff. If I make my own chicken fresh, it tastes different. I feel different. I'm fuller for longer. I didn't gain weight off of it. And cooking is not hard. I mean, it doesn't have to be hard. It's easy enough to do. You just like put some salt and pepper, stick it in the oven. It tastes better. You're satisfied for longer and you lose weight. And I don't know. I don't know what's in food anymore. And some of the national obesity pandemic that we have, I think it's because people are eating fast, right? They're eating, even if you go to the grocery store, there's now ready-made hamburger, ready-made vegetables or vegetable packets that you make, and they have sugar in them. It's not even just the food anymore. So as much as you can go for the original source of the food, right? The real meat or the real vegetable, and just cook it yourself. It's actually not that hard.
This has been so good today. Where can everybody get your book and reach you on social media?
Yeah, so you can get the book at Amazon.com. It's The Secret Life of Fat. I have a course that goes with it too, and you can get that on my website, which is www.thesecretlifeoffat.com. And if you want to reach me, you can reach me on Facebook at Sylvia Tara PhD on Facebook or on Twitter. And so those are all the ways to get in touch. And I do post new research, usually monthly or so, right, on what's going on in the world. And so it's worth it to check in. I'm a science buff, so I love taking things that are interesting, making it understandable for everybody and getting it out there.
That's what I love. I love it. I love the science, and I like it when you make it understandable for the audience so that they can, learn a little bit more about their bodies. And I feel like you did that really well today. So I just want to acknowledge you for that.
Great, thank you. I hope everyone got something out of it. And I know I talked about, and the book's an easy read. Like I said, I did it through stories of patients and stories of people. So even though it's sciencey, very easy to get through.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And thanks. And make sure you guys check out Dr. Sylvia's book, The Secret Life of Fat, and give her some love on Instagram. And as always, keep on keeping on. Bye, everybody.